Hey guys, what's up? Shinobu here. I'm gonna give you guys a short, well, around 10 minutes of video to show you how I set up my interface for ConsolePort. ConsolePort is an add-on that allows you to play World of Warcraft with a game controller, and I made a setup that kinda follows the setup in Final Fantasy XIV, which has native support for controllers. So, what is my setup? Short demonstration. As you can see at the bottom, I have two parts of a controller. We have here at the right side the button part, the YBAX, I use an Xbox controller, and on the left side here the up, down, right, left and diagonal buttons. We have a left bumper and a right bumper, and the same goes for the other side. It's a second controller. But I only use one controller, Shinobu, so how does that work? Well, it's simple. The right part of the screen is the buttons that are being used when I press the right trigger on my controller. So I press the right trigger and you see all the buttons highlighted that I can now press. If I press the up button, I use shockwave. If I press the A button, I use thunderclap. If I press the left trigger, the other modifier, you will see the other buttons light up. If I press Y, it's demoralizing shout. If I press A, it's the shield wall, or the left diagonal button, it activates my trinket. So Shinobu, you say, that looks really fancy. Can you please show me how it's done? Well, I'm gonna get there quite soon, but not quite yet. There's some other stuff I want to show you before we go in the setup of the add-on itself. So what happens when I press both modifiers? As you can see, both of the bars for the controllers, they disappear, and a third one is shown. This one is quite empty over here, but you can use for this one, for example, for debuffs or other stuff that you don't use that often in combat. Now, normally when you install ConsolePort, it has a pretty good setup by itself. The way it works is that it changes all the buttons on your regular World of Warcraft action bars to the bars on your controller. So where it normally would say 1, now it's bound to the A button or the star or whatever you have on your other controllers. And that works, it works well, but it looks like a mess. The reason I didn't want to use it was because when in the heat of the battle, I have no idea what button I'm pressing anymore, and I wanted something that showed on screen where the button was that I had to press, the Y button or the up button, or whatever you want to use. So right trigger, B immediately uses devastate. It's easy, it looks like the controller, so it's quick to see what button you have to press itself. Now I use Bartender, and the way Bartender is set up, the important part anyway, is that I use bars 1 and 2 for the good setup. I'm gonna disable all the other bars, because at the moment these aren't important. I only want to look at bars 1 and bar 2. So if you look down here, you see bar 1 and bar 2 next to each other. So I use 2 bars. The reason for that is that when you use 1 bar, you combine all these buttons, the Y, the B, the A and the X, on the same bar, which makes it easy and to see what bar they're bound, and they're all next to each other, and it makes it just a bit quicker. The same goes for bar 2, because it's the left part of the controller, but then of course with the other buttons. Now what did I do? I changed the visibility, I placed it at 60%, and I added a modifier. The modifier handles the fancy stuff, if you can call it that. It basically reads as followed: if you hold 2 modifiers, Ctrl and Shift, which in our case is left and right trigger, it will hide the window. If I hold my modifier, the shift one, which is right trigger in this case, it shows the bar, and in all other cases it fades away into the background. So when I'm doing nothing, it's kinda transparent, you don't really notice it that well, and if I hold the right trigger, it will show up in full color without any transparency, which makes it easy to see how it works. Now, the only part that's kinda important is the controller part. I'm gonna go over this in a short while, but just to show you quickly what I changed the modifier buttons. Normally it's left trigger and left bumper. I changed it to right trigger, right bumper, just a preference, but you can change it however you want to. And the same goes for bindings. I changed all the bindings on all the buttons, which had to be done because otherwise you interfere with all the other buttons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset my interface to default, just for you guys. And then I'm going to create this setup over here, the right part with the right trigger, or the shift modifier in this case, to give you guys an example on how to set up your own bartender bars. So I'm going to go back and I'll be right back with a reset interface. So back again with a completely reset interface. Everything is gone. I have no buttons to press anymore, and ConsolePort is not working as it should for me now anyway. But that's because I changed a lot of stuff. So on with Bartender. We need Bartender 4. What I did is I made a new profile and I disabled all the buttons. I want nothing enabled. Of course, you are allowed to enable your back bar or your micro bar or pet bar or stance bar or whatever you want. But for this demonstration, we're gonna stay with 2 bars, the bar 1 and bar 2. And I'm gonna unlock them so I can see what is going on. Now, I'm gonna drag them a bit to the bottom over here, but first I'm gonna change bar 1, 12 buttons, that's good. I'm gonna enable button grid because I want to see the shortcuts on the buttons. And I'm going to change it to 3 rows. So we have 4 by 3 action buttons. And just so we can see everything that's going on, I'm going to change it to a scale of 1.4. You might be playing this on a TV, and on a TV you want big buttons and big text. I'm going to do the same for bar number 2. I'm going to change it to 1.4 scale. I'm going to add 12 buttons, that's good. Enable the button grid and change this to 3 rows. Now you have some snapping in Bartender, and as you see, these are not the same. How come? Well, we need to change the padding as well. That's the distance between the buttons, and now they're completely the same size. We added the button grid, and that's basically it for Bartender for now. The visibility is going to be the fancy stuff, but I'm going to do that after I go to ConsolePort. So I'm going to lock these, and you can see all the buttons here. I'm going to drag these away. These are not important right now. As you can see, it's a complete mess. It says X here 2 times. It has Y, B, everything is here. It's double. So, ConsolePort. I have to do that through the menu, and here we are. Well, normally I don't use the buttons without a modifier for combat stuff. So why? It's heroic strike over here. I don't use it like that. All the buttons without modifiers are non-combat buttons. So Y is jump, B is target enemy, A is sit down, X is show the world map. The other buttons are targeting stuff. The right bumper is for the interaction button, as you can see here, but it's for something else. And the other bumper does other stuff as well. The reason for that is that I don't really feel like it doesn't really work for me. It worked like that in Final Fantasy XIV as well. The A button or the Y button was jump, and in combat it changes when you hold the trigger. So how do I bind my bars, as you can see them here, to my buttons? It's quite simple. I press on the Y button and I'm going to change this one, the right trigger Y action. So let's click on it, and let's say I wanted to do for Bartender 4, and I want it to be over here, because this is going to be my Y button, B button, A button, X button, and then the right bumper here in the corner. So I'm going to go to button numbers, right trigger Y, Bartender 4, and I want it to be on 1, 2, over here. So I take Bartender 4 and I click on button 2. Oops, let's do it again. Button 2. And you can see the hotkey change to right trigger Y. Now the B is going to be on this one. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to click on the B, change the right trigger action, and I want it to be on 7. And it changes to this one. Same goes for A. I want that one to be over here. That's gonna be 8. It's gonna be 110. And error, it's overlapping now. We're gonna back to that pretty soon. We have X over here. I'm gonna bind that one to Bartender 5. And there we go. It's now bound to this button. But why, oh why, is it overlapping? Well, that's because we're using Bartender buttons combined with the action buttons. Somewhere internally in World of Warcraft something goes wrong and it doesn't really work out anymore, because ConsolePort thinks both buttons are bound to the same action. So how do we change that? Well, when you bind all your buttons, so all the options, right trigger, left trigger, right trigger, left trigger combined, and you remove all the bottom left action buttons, then it's gonna be completely cleaned up. So if I want to remove the left bumper from this one, I'll go to the left bumper, and now it's bound on action button 5. But I'm gonna be a cheater and I'm gonna say no, let's bind it for jumping right now. And now it's gone. Now it says right trigger X. There is something with an A below that as well. Ah, it says A was bound to action button 5. Okay, I get it. So I'm gonna bind this one all the way at the bottom, and I'm just gonna choose, just for now, to give it a default button 10. Click on it and click on 10. And now it's gone. Now it's just right trigger X. Same goes for right trigger right bumper. I'm gonna bind that one to the corner over here. So that's gonna be Bartender 4, and I have to scroll all the way back. And I have to choose number 4. There we go. Oh, I did bar 2, my bad. I have to do number 4. And now it's over here, right trigger RB. So what I suggest is that you don't start worrying about, oh my god, there's a B over here and it says down here and it shouldn't be right there. Set up your Bartender bars like you want them. Make them 3 rows, place them visible, add the button grid so you can see what buttons are bound where, and then start doing all the buttons in a row. Start with the Y, start with the B, and go forth and do all the modifiers at the same time. After you're done, you will see that all the buttons have changed places and everything looks like it should. But, you might ask, where is my fancy stuff? Because when I press the right trigger right now, you will see that it shows Y, B, X, right bumper, left bumper, and the A, because they're still stacked, but it doesn't fade away. So let's go back to Bartender. I'm gonna unlock, it's bar 1, okay. I'm gonna unlock it again and go to visibility. In visibility you enable fade out, place it around 50%, and say use custom conditionals. These custom conditionals will make it so our bars are a bit fancy. You will see it already fade out now, but now it shows when you hover over them. That's not what we want. I'm gonna want it to add a modifier. So modifier, and what modifier am I gonna use? When I press the shift modifier, which in my case is the right trigger. You can check your program like WoW Mapper or Joy2Key or whatever you're using, what button is bound to shift. In my case it's right trigger. So when it's right trigger is hold, I want it to show without transparency. And when I'm not holding the right trigger, I want it to fade away. Click on accept. If you don't click on accept, it will not save. And now when I press right trigger, you will see it's fade away. And when I hold the right trigger, it's completely shown. The same goes for bar 2. So I'm gonna copy paste this to the next bar. And I accept here, but I have to place the fade out on 50%. You can change it or whatever you want to. And now when I hold my right trigger, you will see it will pop up, and when I release, it will go away. Now this might be a bit of setup. Unfortunately, I don't think you're really allowed to copy Bartender buttons or ConsolePort profiles. And maybe we will get a feature like that. But for now, you will have to do all the bars yourself. I suggest you start with one modifier. Start with the left trigger. Go to the next modifier, which is by default the left bumper or whatever you change it to. Then change it to the double modifiers. And then change all the buttons, like just the A button, to whatever you want it to be. If you have any overlapping buttons left, make sure you check all the buttons in ConsolePort. For the left trigger, right trigger, bumper, left bumper, right bumper, whatever button you can press, make sure nothing is bound to an action button anymore, because if it is, you might have an overlap in your bartender bars. So one remark over here, this completely screws up my switching of stances, which is okay for me for now because I'm leveling this character through dungeons and I'm only tanking, so that doesn't really worry me. But keep that in mind, and please make a backup of your interface before you start completely redecorating your World of Warcraft settings. It might screw you over in the long run otherwise. So, if you like this video, please click the like button below. If you have any questions or remarks, please post them in the comment section located below this video. This was Shinobu checking out, and I hope to check you next time.